Hey guys, let's have a discussion about how to read the Bible with fresh eyes. How is this thing intended to be interpreted according to the original authors? How are we supposed to understand this thing? I'm starting a discussion series on this, and if you're online, you can follow along with us. I have a group that meets at a brewery. We grab a beer every week on Tuesdays to talk about this. And I think before we even open the Bible, there are some questions we need to talk about. So I'm going to present one here. I think the Bible wasn't actually written to us. Very provocative statement, right? But I think once I tell you what I mean by that, it'll make more sense. It was actually originally written to an ancient audience with an ancient culture. Therefore, as a modern reader, when we try to read it, some of it doesn't make sense unless we figure out the context and we figure out how ancient people would have read this story. How did they view the world? That is part of the purpose of this overview of the Bible discussion series that I am creating. So before I walk through a little bit more of that, I'm going to tell you where to get the discussion questions. It's just a simple sheet of paper that you can print off at home. Go to breweryministries.org, click on free discussion guides, and then go to the overview of the Bible series. And what we're going to talk about right here is number 1, questions to consider before we even open the Bible. Questions that might affect our interpretation, right? Things we might need to know about the ancient audience, the original audience, that might be invisible to us today as a modern reader of the Bible. It could make a big difference. So, obviously, the first chapter of the Bible is about the origin of the universe. And I think it's really important to think about these questions before we read that. How is that chapter supposed to be read and understood? The writers of the Bible had an interesting challenge, and that's basically what I'm going to ask you to talk about in the first discussion guide. Their challenge was they were writing to a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures and religions. They were writing to people in the Near Ancient East, and that area was considered to be a melting pot. Well, that's interesting because America today is considered to be a melting pot with many different religions and cultures, right? So let's try to put the author of Genesis 1's challenge into a modern perspective, all right? Imagine today that you gathered a whole bunch of different people from different backgrounds and religions and cultures into a room, and you tried to tell them a story about God and man's relationship to God, right? Well, that's going to be difficult for a number of reasons. Words might mean different things to these different cultures. They've all got different religions. Some of them will worship different gods, so they're all not worshiping the same God. So how are you going to make a story? How are you going to tell a story so all of these different people from different cultures can understand what you're saying, can understand man's relationship to God? That's what the creation story really is. Well, since words mean different things to different people in different cultures, you might have to use some analogies. Aha! You see? Right there, we can have an interesting discussion about whether or not some of this chapter is intended to be taken metaphorically or not. And then that brings the question is, can something be a metaphor and still be true? I think they're really important questions to consider. Are there clues in this chapter that it's intended to be taken metaphorically? Because as you go through the story of the Bible, you're going to have to figure out, are these sections intended to be taken as history? Or do they apply to today or just that culture? Well, maybe we can figure out how to find clues so we can know for sure what the author meant. All right, next video, we're going to talk about the origin of the universe, the story in Genesis chapter 1, first chapter of the Bible. That's one of my favorite subjects. I think I won't expect everybody to land on the same place, but I do think we will all probably agree on the overall meaning of the story. Okay, so if you're following along online or you're running your own group, I would love to see your comments and questions here. Um, if you're in Wichita, we meet at the Poorhouse. It's a brewery downtown every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. in the upstairs room. I would love to see you there, and I would love to hear from people who don't know the story of the Bible or are not Christian. I would love to hear what you think of this approach, because it might be new to you. So let's talk about it. You can email me at breweryministries@gmail.org, and I'll see you in the next video for Origin of the Universe.